The afternoon sun filtered through the massive viewing ports of Station Helios 9, casting long shadows across the bustling main kitchen. This was where Ash spent most of his time these days. The little dragon hatchling was only 3 years old, barely tall enough to peek over the preparation counters, but he loved this place more than anywhere else on the station. The kitchen was a chaotic symphony of sounds and smells. Alien spices from the outer rim mixed with earth vegetables. Protein synthesizers hummed alongside traditional ovens. And right in the middle of it all was the reason Ash came here every single day. Melissa Harper was her name. A human woman in her late 20s with flour usually dusted across her dark apron and her hair tied back in a practical ponytail. She worked the main cooking line, and she had a gift that made her invaluable across the entire galaxy. Humans called it comfort food, that magical ability to take simple ingredients and turn them into something that made you feel safe, warm, and cared for. It didn't matter what species you were. When Melissa cooked, everyone felt a little bit like they were home. Ash had been coming to watch her work for almost 6 months now. At first, she'd been startled by the young dragon. Most species were nervous around dragons, even the babies. But Melissa had just smiled, wiped her hands on her apron, and offered him a small pastry fresh from the oven. That was all it took. From that day forward, Ash was her most loyal visitor. She always saved him the best scraps. The end pieces of roasted meats that were too small to serve but perfectly sized for a hatchling. The slightly burned cookies that didn't meet her standards but tasted amazing to Ash. And while he ate, she told him stories about Earth. About her grandmother's kitchen in Texas where she'd learned to cook. About the farmers' markets in her hometown where everything smelled like fresh bread and honey. Ash loved those stories. He'd never been to Earth, probably never would go. But through Melissa's words, he could almost smell the barbecue smoke and feel the summer heat. But today was different. Today something was very wrong. Ash noticed it the moment he walked into the kitchen. Melissa was moving stiffly, like every motion hurt. She kept her arms close to her body, and when she reached for ingredients on the high shelves, she bit her lip like she was trying not to cry out. The little dragon's eyes narrowed. He moved closer, his claws clicking softly on the metal floor. That's when he saw them. The bruises. They covered both of her forearms in ugly purple and black splotches. Some looked fresh. Others had that yellowish tinge that meant they were a few days old. There were fingerprint marks too, like someone had grabbed her hard enough to leave impressions. Ash felt something cold settle in his stomach. He chirped, a sound of concern that made Melissa look down at him. Her face immediately shifted into a smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Hey there, little guy. You're early today." Ash tilted his head toward her arms, chirping again with more urgency. Melissa followed his gaze and quickly pulled her sleeves down, even though it was hot in the kitchen. "Oh, these? I'm just clumsy, that's all. Bumped into the counter yesterday. You know how it is when you're rushing around." But Ash didn't believe her. Dragons might be young, but they're born predators. They can sense fear the way humans sense temperature. And right now, underneath Melissa's forced cheerfulness, there was nothing but fear. It rolled off her in waves, sharp and bitter. The little dragon pressed closer, trying to offer comfort. Melissa reached down and scratched behind his ear ridges, the spot that always made him purr. But her hand was shaking. "It's okay, Ash. Really. I'm fine." She wasn't fine. They both knew it. But before Ash could press further, a booming voice echoed across the kitchen. "Harper, where's my sauce reduction? We have orders backing up." The voice belonged to Vex Thor, the head chef. He was a Kralgoth, a species covered in thick exoskeleton armor that made them look like walking tanks. He stood nearly 7 feet tall, with mandibles that clicked when he was angry, which was most of the time. His forearms moved constantly as he worked, and his temper was legendary throughout the station. Melissa flinched at his voice. Actually flinched, like someone had raised a hand to strike her. "Coming, chef. 2 minutes." She hurried to the stove, moving faster despite the obvious pain. Ash watched her go, his young mind trying to process what he was seeing. He didn't understand everything about the adult world yet, but he understood one thing perfectly. Someone was hurting his friend. And the someone was probably Vex Thor. That evening, Ash flew home to the residential quarters where he lived with his father. Lord Draken was the commander of the station's security forces, a dragon of over 200 years with scales that had darkened to deep crimson with age. He was reviewing reports when Ash landed on the balcony. "Good evening, son. How was the kitchen today?" Ash hesitated. Then the words tumbled out. "Father, why would someone hurt Melissa?" Draken's head snapped up from his data pad. His eyes, which had been relaxed, suddenly focused with laser intensity. "What do you mean?" Is Melissa injured? Ash described the bruises, the way she moved, the fear he'd smelled on her. His father listened without interrupting, but his scales began to darken, a sign of rising anger in dragons. When Ash finished, Draken was quiet for a long moment. Then he sighed, a sound like wind through a cave. Son, come here. I need to explain something to you about how the galaxy works. You're not going to like it. Ash settled beside his father, his tail curling around his feet. The head chef is Vexthor. He's been reported before for mistreating his staff. 3 times actually. But nothing ever happens to him. Do you know why? Ash shook his head. Because human labor contracts are complicated. Humans are valuable workers, especially cooks like Melissa. But that value makes them vulnerable. Their contracts have clauses that make it very difficult for them to complain or leave. If they break their contract, they owe massive penalties. Most humans can't afford that. So they stay even when. Draken trailed off. Even when they're being hurt, Ash finished quietly. Yes. And because Vexthor's species has natural armor, it's nearly impossible to prove assault unless there are witnesses who'll testify. Most won't risk their own jobs. Ash felt something building in his chest. It started as confusion, then shifted to sadness, and finally crystallized into something he'd never felt before. It was hot and fierce and made his scales tingle. It was rage. Pure, righteous rage. His eyes began to glow, shifting from their normal amber to molten gold. The temperature around him rose several degrees. Draken noticed immediately and placed a gentle claw on his son's shoulder. Easy, Ash. I know how you feel. But we have to be smart about this. Smart? Ash's voice came out as almost a growl. Someone's hurting Melissa and nobody's stopping them. What's smart about that? Draken looked at his son for a long moment. Then something shifted in his expression. Pride mixed with concern. You're right. It's not acceptable. But if we move through official channels, it could take weeks. Maybe months. Can you be patient that long? Ash thought about Melissa's forced smile. Her shaking hands. The fear he'd smelled on her. No, he said simply. I can't. And in that moment, something ancient and powerful stirred deep in the young dragon's heart. His father recognized it immediately. It was the same fire that had driven their ancestors to become protectors rather than destroyers. The same instinct that separated noble dragons from mere monsters. Draken looked at his 3-year-old son and realized something that both filled him with pride and terrified him. His child understood honor better than most adults ever would. The next morning, Ash arrived at the kitchen earlier than usual. The main breakfast rush hadn't started yet, and only a handful of staff were prepping for the day. Melissa was already there, of course. She was always the first one in and the last one to leave. Ash positioned himself in his usual corner, but this time he wasn't there for stories or treats. He was there to watch. Really watch. Over the next few days he saw things that made his blood boil. Vexthor didn't just hit Melissa. The abuse was constant and varied. He'd slam his fist on the counter right next to her head, making her jump. He'd knock ingredient bowls out of her hands and then scream at her for wasting food. He'd grab her arm and squeeze hard enough to leave new bruises on top of the old ones, all while barking orders in her face. And the worst part? Everyone else in the kitchen just looked away. The other cooks, the prep staff, even the cleaning crew. They all saw what was happening, but nobody said a word. They couldn't afford to. Jobs on Station Helios 9 paid well, and speaking up meant risking everything. Ash watched one morning as Vexthor threw a hot pan across the kitchen. It missed Melissa by inches and clattered against the wall. She didn't even flinch anymore. She just kept working, her hands steady even though Ash could see them trembling slightly. You're too slow, human. Vexthor's mandibles clicked with fury. My grandmother could cook faster, and she's been dead for 30 years. Yes, chef. Sorry, chef. Melissa's voice was flat, emotionless. Like she'd said those words 1,000 times before. That afternoon, Ash made a decision. He had to talk to her privately, away from Vexthor's eyes. He waited until she took her break in the small storage room behind the kitchen. It was cramped and smelled like dried herbs, but it was quiet. Melissa was sitting on an overturned crate, eating a sandwich with mechanical precision. She looked up when Ash squeezed through the door. Hey, little one. You're not supposed to be back here. Ash moved closer, his young face serious. I can protect you. From him. From Vexthor. Melissa's expression crumbled. For a moment she looked like she might cry. Then she took a deep breath and knelt down to Ash's level. You're sweet, Ash. You really are. But this isn't something you can fix. Why not? My father is the security commander. He can arrest Vexthor. It's not that simple. Melissa set her sandwich aside, her appetite clearly gone. I'm under contract. A 5-year labor contract. If I break it early, I owe the company 200,000 credits. That's more money than I'll make in 10 years. Ash tilted his head, confused. But he's hurting you. That should void the contract. In theory, yes. But I'd need proof. Witnesses willing to testify. Security footage that hasn't mysteriously disappeared. And even if I had all that, the legal process takes months. During that time, I still have to work here. With him. She gestured toward the kitchen. And if I lose the case, I'm stuck here for the full 5 years and I owe even more money for legal fees. That's not fair. No, it's not. Melissa smiled sadly. But fair isn't how the galaxy works for people like me. I send money home every month. My mom is sick. My little brother is in school. They depend on that money. If I lose this job, they lose everything. So I stay. I take the bruises. I keep my head down. And I survive. Ash felt that burning sensation in his chest again, stronger this time. There has to be something we can do. Melissa reached out and gently touched his snout. The best thing you can do is stay safe. Don't get involved in this. Vexthor wouldn't think twice about hurting you too if you got in his way. But Ash was barely listening. His mind was already racing, thinking, planning. If the normal way didn't work, then he'd find another way. There had to be something. That night, instead of going straight home, Ash went to the station's public data terminal. He was young, but he'd been taught to read and research. His father had always encouraged curiosity. For 3 hours, Ash dug through station regulations, labor laws, and contract policies. Most of it was boring legal language that made his head hurt. But then he found something interesting. Contract violations by employers. If an employer created a hostile or dangerous work environment, contracts could be immediately voided pending investigation. Not assault charges, which required proof and witnesses. But safety violations, which triggered automatic inspections. The key word was automatic. No witnesses needed. Just documentation of unsafe conditions. And the investigation happened immediately, with the employee placed on paid leave during the review process. Ash's eyes gleamed. This was it. This was the loophole. But he couldn't do this alone. He needed help. And asking his father meant going through official channels again, which would be too slow. Melissa might have weeks more of Bruises by the time paperwork got processed. No, Ash needed help from people who understood what Melissa was going through. People who had reasons of their own to want Vexthor gone. He needed the other humans. The next day, Ash didn't go to the kitchen. Instead, he went to the lower maintenance levels where most of the human staff lived. The quarters were smaller down here, more cramped. This was where the janitors, technicians, and general laborers stayed. Ash approached a human man emptying trash containers in Corridor B. The man looked surprised to see a dragon hatchling this far from the residential areas. You lost, kid? No. I need help. It's about Vexthor and Melissa Harper. The man's expression changed instantly. His jaw tightened. What about them? He's hurting her. Has been for a while. And I want to stop him. But I can't do it alone. The man studied Ash for a long moment. Then he pulled out a small communicator. Let me make some calls. You free this evening? Ash nodded. Cargo Bay 7. 1900 hours. Come alone and don't tell anyone where you're going. That evening, Ash slipped away from home while his father was in a security briefing. He flew down to the cargo levels, his heart pounding. He'd never done anything like this before. Never gone behind his father's back. Never involved himself in adult problems. But when he thought of Melissa's bruises and her sad smile, he knew he was doing the right thing. Cargo Bay 7 was dimly lit and filled with supply containers. Ash landed near the entrance and looked around nervously. For a moment he thought maybe the man had been lying. Maybe this was a trap. Then they emerged from behind the containers. Humans. Lots of them. Ash counted quickly. 16 in total. Men and women of different ages. Some wore maintenance uniforms. Others wore kitchen staff aprons. One woman had medical scrubs. The man from earlier stepped forward. His name tag read, Danny. He was in his 40s with graying hair and tired eyes. Okay, little dragon. You got us here. Now tell us what you know. Ash told them everything. The bruises. The screaming. The way Melissa flinched. The legal dead end. And finally, his research about safety violations and automatic investigations. When he finished, the cargo bay was silent. Then a younger woman spoke up. Her voice shook with barely controlled anger. He broke my wrist last year. Claimed I dropped a pot and it was my fault. I couldn't work for 6 weeks and they docked my pay. He throws knives at the wall near my head when he's mad, another person added. Says it keeps me motivated. He locks the emergency exits during rush hour so we can't leave early. He tampered with the ventilation so the kitchen gets dangerously hot. Says we work better when we're uncomfortable. One by one they shared their stories. And Ash realized that Melissa wasn't the only victim. Vexthor had been terrorizing human workers for years. But they'd all been too scared or too trapped to do anything about it. Until now. Danny knelt down in front of Ash. You said you have a plan, kid. Let's hear it. Ash took a deep breath. We provoke him. Make him so angry that he reveals who he really is in a way that can't be ignored or explained away. And we document everything. The safety violations, the hostile environment, all of it. Then we file for the automatic investigation. That's dangerous, the woman with the medical scrubs said. He could really hurt someone. He's already hurting people, Ash replied simply. At least this way we fight back. The humans looked at each other. Then, slowly they began to nod. Danny extended his hand and Ash touched it with his claw. All right, little dragon. Let's take down a monster. For the first time in days, Ash felt hope flicker in his chest. The fury of a child, it turned out, could move mountains. The plan came together over the next 3 days. It was surprisingly simple, which made it brilliant. Ash would become the most annoying kitchen pest imaginable. Every accident, every mishap, every ruined ingredient would be carefully calculated to push Vexthor closer and closer to the edge. Meanwhile, the human network would document everything. They'd install hidden recording devices throughout the kitchen, small enough to avoid detection but powerful enough to capture audio and video. It was technically illegal, but as Danny pointed out, evidence of ongoing crimes was admissible in court regardless of how it was obtained. The recordings would show the unsafe conditions, the verbal abuse, and hopefully, if things went according to plan, something much worse that would end Vexthor's reign of terror permanently. Melissa knew nothing about the plan. They'd agreed on that immediately. If she knew, she might try to stop them or accidentally give something away. Better to keep her in the dark and protect her from the fallout if things went wrong. On the first day, Ash accidentally knocked over a container of Alterian spice. The purple powder was worth 300 credits per ounce, and Ash managed to spill nearly 2 pounds of it across the floor. It looked completely innocent, just a clumsy hatchling who got too close to the prep counter. Vexthor's roar echoed through the entire kitchen. Who let that animal in here? Someone get it out before it destroys everything. Melissa quickly ushered Ash toward the door, whispering apologies. But Ash noticed the small camera that Danny had installed in the ventilation shaft was recording everything. The Kralgotha's rage, the way he threw a pan across the room in frustration, the obscenity streaming from his translator. The second day was even better. Ash waited until Vexthor was working with the protein synthesis machine, a delicate piece of equipment that required precise calibration. Then, with what looked like innocent curiosity, Ash bumped the control panel with his tail. The machine immediately began producing protein paste at 3 times the normal rate. It overflowed the containment bowl, spilling across the counter and onto the floor in a sticky, expensive mess. Vexthor's mandibles clicked so rapidly they sounded like machine gun fire. That's it. I want that dragon banned from this kitchen. Permanently. But station regulations were clear. Public areas, including the main kitchen's dining section, were open to all species. As long as Ash stayed in the allowed zones, nobody could legally remove him. Vexthor knew this, which made him even angrier. By the 3rd day, the Kralgoth was a powder keg waiting for a spark. Everyone in the kitchen could feel the tension. Staff moved quietly, speaking in whispers. Even the usually boisterous prep crew worked in nervous silence. Ash felt a twinge of guilt. He was making everyone's life harder, not just Vexthor's. But every time he thought about stopping, he remembered Melissa's bruises. The fear in her eyes. The defeated slump of her shoulders. No, this had to end. Today. The trigger came during the most stressful service of the week. The Galactic Trade Commissioner was visiting the station, along with her entire diplomatic entourage. 23 different species, each with specific dietary requirements. The kitchen had been preparing for this meal for 2 weeks. The centerpiece was a dish called Harmony Blend, an incredibly complex creation that combined elements from 12 different culinary traditions. It took 6 hours to prepare and had to be timed perfectly. Vexthor had been working on it since dawn, and it was finally ready. That's when Ash made his move. He'd been watching from his usual corner, waiting for exactly the right moment. When Vexthor turned to bark orders at another cook, Ash darted forward. His small claws found the temperature control on the dish's heating element. One quick adjustment, turning it from warm to broil. Then he retreated to his corner, trying to look innocent. It took 3 minutes for anyone to notice. By then, the top layer of the Harmony blend had caramelized into a blackened, smoking mess. The smell hit everyone at once, acrid and wrong. Vexthor spun around, saw his ruined masterpiece, and let out a sound that wasn't quite a scream and wasn't quite a roar. It was pure primal rage. His exoskeleton actually cracked in places from the tension in his muscles. Who touched this? Who touched my dish? The kitchen fell silent. Everyone froze. Then Vexthor's eyes, all 6 of them, locked onto Ash. You little pest. You've been sabotaging me for days. Ash didn't run. That was part of the plan. He stood his ground, his young eyes meeting Vexthor's furious gaze. The Kralgoth started toward him, his 4 arms clenching into fists. That's when Melissa stepped between them. She held up her hands, her voice shaking but firm. Chef, please. He's just a baby. He doesn't understand what he did. I'll remake the dish. I know the recipe. I can have it ready in 4 hours if we start now. 4 hours? Vexthor's voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. The commissioner arrives in 2 hours. We don't have 4 hours, you stupid human. Then I'll make something else. Something simpler but just as impressive. The commissioner likes Earth cuisine. I could do a Wellington with roasted vegetables and... Vexthor's hand shot out and struck Melissa across the face. The slap echoed through the kitchen like a gunshot. Melissa stumbled backward, her hand flying to her cheek. A thin line of blood appeared at the corner of her mouth. Don't tell me what to cook in my kitchen. This is your fault. You and your pet dragon have ruined everything. He raised his arm again, this time in a closed fist. Melissa saw it coming but was too dazed to move. The blow would have shattered her jaw at minimum. Possibly killed her. It never landed. Ash launched himself between them faster than anyone thought possible. His small body interposed itself, taking the position right in front of Melissa. He spread his wings, making himself as large as possible, and let out a hiss that was surprisingly fierce for such a young creature. Every camera in the kitchen was recording. The angles were perfect. There was no way to misinterpret what was happening. Vexthor looked down at the hatchling blocking his path. For a moment, something like reason flickered in his eyes. He was about to strike the son of the station's security commander. Even in his rage, some part of him understood how bad that would be. Then he looked at his ruined dish. At the years of humans defying him, questioning him, making his life difficult. At this presumptuous little dragon who dared to challenge him in his own kitchen. Reason died. Rage won. You want to protect the human? Fine. I'll go through you first. Vexthor drew back his arm, all 4 limbs coordinating for a strike that would crush Ash's small body. Around the kitchen, staff members gasped. Some turned away, unable to watch. But Ash didn't move. He held his ground, his wings still spread, his body still shielding Melissa. His eyes, which had been amber moments before, began to shift. Gold crept into them, then orange, then red. Something was happening. Something none of them, not even Ash himself, expected. Deep in the hatchling's chest, ancient instincts roared to life. Instincts that usually took years to develop. Instincts that were supposed to emerge during adolescence, not childhood. But extreme circumstances sometimes triggered extreme responses. Ash felt heat building in his throat. Not the warmth he usually felt when he was happy or excited. This was different. This was fire. As Vexthor's fist descended, Ash's mouth opened. His throat contracted. And for the first time in his 3 years of life he breathed flame. It wasn't the massive inferno of an adult dragon. It was barely larger than a blowtorch. But it was concentrated, precise, and devastatingly effective. The jet of fire struck Vexthor's chest plate dead center. The Kralgoth's exoskeleton was designed to withstand most impacts and temperatures. But Ash's flame didn't try to melt through it. Instead, it superheated the armor itself, turning Vexthor's natural protection into an oven. The Kralgoth's scream was unlike anything anyone had heard before. He staggered backward, his arms flailing, his whole body convulsing as he effectively cooked inside his own shell. Alarms shrieked. Emergency protocols activated. Fire suppression systems engaged, dousing the kitchen in flame-retardant foam. Through it all, Ash stood his ground, his flame finally sputtering out as exhaustion hit him. Behind him, Melissa stared in shock, her hand still pressed to her bleeding mouth. Around them, kitchen staff stood frozen, unable to process what they just witnessed. Then the security doors burst open, and Lord Draken charged through, followed by a full tactical team. The commander's eyes swept the scene in an instant. his son standing protectively over a human woman, scorch marks on the walls, a writhing Kralgoth covered in foam, and kitchen staff emerging from hiding spots with recording devices in their hands. Draken's gaze locked onto Ash. And in that moment, the ancient dragon saw something in his son's eyes that filled him with emotions he couldn't quite name. Pride, fear, wonder, and above all, recognition. His 3-year-old son had just breathed fire. 7 years early. To protect someone who wasn't even his own species. The galaxy was about to change. And it all started with one small dragon who understood something most adults had forgotten. Some things are worth burning for. For several long seconds, nobody moved. The kitchen was frozen in time, like someone had hit a pause button on reality. The only sounds were the hissing of fire suppression systems and Vex Thor's agonized groans as emergency medical teams rushed to cool down his superheated exoskeleton. Lord Draken stood in the doorway, his massive frame blocking most of the light from the corridor. His eyes moved from his son to the injured human woman to the Kralgoth on the floor. He was a dragon who had seen combat, who had commanded troops through 3 different wars, who prided himself on staying calm under pressure. But right now his mind was reeling. Ash still stood in front of Melissa, his small body trembling with exhaustion. Wisps of smoke drifted from his nostrils. His scales, normally a bright copper color, had darkened almost to bronze from the heat he'd generated. He looked like he might collapse at any moment. Draken moved forward slowly, carefully, the way you might approach a spooked animal. Ash, son, are you hurt? The young dragon blinked as if coming out of a trance. Father? I didn't mean to. He was going to hurt her. He was going to kill her. I know. Draken knelt down, bringing his massive head level with his son's. I know you were protecting her. But Ash, do you understand what you just did? Ash shook his head weakly. Behind him, Melissa had recovered enough to kneel down and place a gentle hand on the hatchling's back. The gesture wasn't lost on Draken. The human was injured, bleeding, and traumatized, but her first instinct was to comfort his son. You breathed fire, Draken said softly. Real fire. Combat-grade flame. Is that bad? No. Not bad. Just impossible. Dragons don't develop flame breath until they're at least 10 years old. You're 3, Ash. This shouldn't be possible. One of the security officers, a Valerian with blue skin and too many eyes, stepped forward. Commander, we need to secure the scene. Medical teams need access and we have witness statements to collect. Draken nodded but didn't take his eyes off his son. Get everyone's statements. And I want those recording devices preserved as evidence. Nobody touches them except our forensics team. As if on cue, the humans began emerging from their hiding spots throughout the kitchen. Danny came out from behind the cold storage units, a small camera in his hand. A woman named Rita climbed down from the ventilation access shaft. Others appeared from supply closets, behind equipment, even from inside the large walk-in freezer. 16 humans in total. All of them holding recording devices. All of them looking at Ash with expressions that mixed gratitude, awe, and something else. Hope maybe. Or vindication. The Valerian officer's eyes widened. Commander, this was coordinated. This was planned. Yes, Draken said simply. It was. And I want to see every second of footage they captured. This isn't just about today's incident. Is it? Danny stepped forward, his graying hair disheveled but his eyes bright with defiance. No, sir. It's not. We've got 3 days of recordings. But honestly, we've got years of testimony. Vex Thor has been abusing human workers since he arrived on this station 4 years ago. We just never had proof before. Or anyone who cared enough to look. The words hung in the air like an accusation. Draken felt them like a physical blow. He was responsible for security on this station. For justice. For protecting those who couldn't protect themselves. And somehow, this had been happening right under his nose for 4 years. Medical teams were loading Vex Thor onto a transport stretcher. The Kralgoth's exoskeleton had cooled enough that he wasn't in immediate danger, but he'd need extensive treatment. His mandibles were clicking weakly, trying to form words, but his translator had been damaged by the heat. A human medic approached Melissa, trying to examine her split lip and the rapidly darkening bruise on her cheek. She waved him off at first, still focused on Ash, but the medic was insistent. Ma'am, you need treatment. That's going to swell badly if we don't get ice on it soon. I'm fine. Take care of Ash first. He's just a baby. He's never used fire before. He could be hurt. Draken felt something shift in his chest. This human woman, who had just been assaulted and nearly killed, was worried about his son. Most species would be running for their lives, putting distance between themselves and a dragon who just demonstrated combat capabilities. But not her. She stayed close, protective, her hand still resting on Ash's back. "Ms. Harper," Draken said quietly. "That's your name, correct?" "Melissa Harper." She nodded, finally letting the medic guide her to a chair. "My son will be fine. He's exhausted, but dragons are resilient. However, I need to understand what happened here. All of it. Will you tell me?" Melissa looked at Danny and the other humans. Some of them shook their heads slightly, warning her to be careful. Employment contracts had clauses about speaking against supervisors. There could be retaliation, legal consequences, deportation. But Melissa was tired. Tired of being afraid. Tired of the bruises. Tired of waking up every morning and dreading going to work. And when she looked at Ash, at this 3-year-old dragon who'd risked his life for her, something inside her broke open. "He hits us," she said simply. "All of us. Has been for years. He throws things. He threatens us. He creates unsafe working conditions because he thinks fear makes us work harder. Some of us have tried to complain before, but the reports always disappear. Our contracts have penalties for false accusations against supervisors. 200,000 credits if we lose the case. None of us can afford that, so we just endure it." Her voice cracked on the last word. The medic pressed an ice pack to her face, but she pushed through. "Ash saw my bruises a few days ago. He asked why someone would hurt me. And I told him the truth because I thought he was just a kid, that he'd forget about it. But he didn't forget. He did something about it. Something none of us adults had the courage to do." Around the kitchen, other humans were nodding. Some were crying. The weight of years of abuse and fear was finally being lifted. Lord Draken stood slowly. His full height was impressive, nearly 9 feet of scaled muscle and ancient power. When he spoke, his voice carried through the entire kitchen with the force of a judge pronouncing sentence. "Effective immediately, Vexthor is terminated from his position and banned from this station pending criminal charges. Every human worker in this kitchen has their contract suspended with full pay until our investigation is complete. Anyone who wishes to testify will receive full legal protection and immunity from contract penalties. Anyone who wishes to transfer to a different position will be accommodated. And anyone who wants to file for immediate contract termination will be granted it, no questions asked, with full settlement compensation." Danny blinked. "Sir, you can't just. Contracts are regulated by Galactic Trade Authority. You don't have the power to void them. Watch me." Draken's eyes glowed with inner fire. "I'm invoking Emergency Security Protocol 7. This kitchen is now classified as a crime scene and hostile work environment. Under Station Charter, that gives me broad authority to protect potential victims and witnesses. If the GTA wants to challenge me, they can send a representative. Until then, my word is law on this station." He turned to his security team. "I want every recording device collected and copied. Original and backup files. I want witness statements from everyone who was here. I want medical reports on every human who has worked under Vexthor. And I want a comprehensive review of every complaint filed against him for the past 4 years, including any that mysteriously disappeared." The Valerian officer snapped to attention. "Yes, sir. Right away, sir." Draken looked back at Ash. His son had sat down, his legs apparently unwilling to hold him up anymore. Melissa was still beside him, and now several other humans had gathered around, offering water and gentle words of encouragement. The ancient dragon felt something he hadn't experienced in decades. Shame. Not for what his son had done, but for what he himself had failed to do. These humans had been suffering for 4 years and he'd been blind to it. Too focused on big-picture security concerns to notice the small, everyday cruelties happening in his own station's kitchen. But there was also pride. Overwhelming, fierce pride. Because his 3-year-old son had seen injustice and decided it was unacceptable. Had put himself in danger to protect someone weaker. Had manifested abilities years ahead of schedule because the situation demanded it. Dragons measured strength by what you chose to protect, not what you could destroy. Ash had understood that instinctively. He'd honored their species' deepest values without even knowing what they were. Draken knelt again, this time performing a gesture that made every dragon in the nearby corridors stop and stare through the windows. He touched his forehead to the floor in front of his son, the traditional salute of respect between dragons. It was usually given to elders, to warriors, to those who had proven themselves through decades of service. Never to a 3-year-old. "You honored our fire, Ash. You used it to protect, not to destroy. You understood what took me centuries to learn. I am proud to call you my son." Ash looked confused. "But I didn't plan this." I couldn't let her get hurt. I know. That's exactly why I'm proud. The Galactic Trade Commissioner herself arrived 20 minutes later, her diplomatic entourage in tow. She'd been watching the security feeds from her quarters, drawn by the alerts about a fire in the kitchen. What she'd witnessed had compelled her to come see things firsthand. She was a crystalline, her body made of living mineral that refracted light into rainbow patterns. Her species was known for fairness and an almost obsessive dedication to justice. "Commander Draken," she said, her voice like chimes. "I need copies of all recordings. This incident will be reviewed at the highest levels of the Trade Authority." "Of course, Commissioner. We're cooperating fully." "Good. Because if what I saw on those feeds is representative of standard labor practices, we have a much larger problem than one abusive chef." She looked around the kitchen, at the frightened humans, at the young dragons slumped in exhaustion. "How long has this been going on?" "For years, apparently. Maybe longer." The Commissioner's crystalline structure darkened, a sign of anger in her species. "Unacceptable. Completely unacceptable." She moved toward Ash, her movements creating soft tinkling sounds. Melissa instinctively moved closer to the hatchling, protective even now. The Commissioner noticed and smiled, a strange expression on her geometric face. "Don't worry, Ms. Harper. I mean him no harm. I only wish to say thank you. This young dragon has given us the evidence we need to change things. Really change them. For all of you." She turned to address all the humans in the room. "You have my personal guarantee that there will be no retaliation, no penalties, no deportations. Everyone who testifies will be protected. And we're going to make sure this never happens to anyone else." Danny spoke up, his voice rough with emotion. "With respect, Commissioner, we've heard promises before." "I know. But this time you have more than promises. You have documentation. Public outrage. And you have allies." She gestured to Draken and Ash. "Powerful ones." As medical teams finished their work and people began filing out to give statements, Melissa finally allowed herself to really look at Ash. The little dragon who spent his afternoons listening to her stories. Who loved her slightly burned cookies. Who had risked everything to save her. "Why?" she whispered. "Why did you do all this for me?" Ash lifted his head, his eyes returning to their normal amber color. "Because you're my friend. And friends protect each other. That's what matters, right? Not what species you are or how strong you are. Just, whether you care enough to try." Melissa pulled the young dragon into a gentle hug, mindful of his exhausted state. Around them, other humans were doing the same with each other, finding comfort in solidarity after years of isolation and fear. And Lord Draken watched it all, understanding finally clicking into place. His son hadn't just saved one human. He'd shown an entire galaxy what they'd forgotten. That strength without compassion was meaningless. That power without protection was tyranny. That sometimes the smallest among us could teach the mightiest the most important lessons. The fire Ash had breathed wasn't just about defense. It was a signal. A declaration. A promise. Things were about to change. And it all started here, in a kitchen on Station Helios 9, with a baby dragon who saw bruises on a human cook and decided that was simply unacceptable. The recordings went viral within 24 hours. That's how fast information traveled across the galactic network. Someone on the security team had leaked the footage, probably intentionally, and suddenly billions of beings across hundreds of worlds were watching a 3-year-old dragon breathe fire to protect a human cook from being beaten to death. The reaction was immediate and explosive. Human communities across every station, every colony, every settled world erupted with outrage. For years, they'd been told their complaints were isolated incidents. That they were exaggerating. That labor contracts were fair and abuse was rare. Now they had proof it wasn't rare at all. It was systematic. And it had taken a child to expose it. Within 48 hours, human workers on 17 different stations walked off their jobs simultaneously. It wasn't an organized strike, at least not officially. But the message boards and communication networks had been buzzing with a single phrase. Remember Melissa Harper. Remember Ash. The galactic economy shuddered. Humans made up nearly 30% of the service industry workforce. Restaurants, hotels, medical facilities, educational centers, all suddenly found themselves critically understaffed. And unlike other species, humans couldn't be easily replaced. Their unique abilities, their emotional intelligence, their capacity for creating comfort and connection, these things couldn't be automated or substituted. The Galactic Council called an emergency session. Representatives from 200 species gathered in the Grand Chamber on Central Station Alpha, the political heart of known space. The debate was fierce, often ugly, and broadcast live to every corner of the galaxy. Some species argued for stricter oversight and better protections. Others complained about economic disruption and accused humans of overreacting. A few, mostly predator species with traditional hierarchical cultures, suggested that physical discipline was normal and humans were simply too fragile and sensitive. That's when Lord Draken requested permission to speak. As a regional security commander, he didn't normally have standing in council sessions. But he'd been granted temporary witness status due to his direct involvement in the incident. The council chamber fell silent as the massive dragon approached the central platform. He brought something with him. A holographic projector that he set down carefully before beginning to speak. Honored council members. I've spent 200 years in service to galactic peace and security. I've seen wars. I've seen famines. I've seen entire species nearly wiped out by disease or disaster. And through it all, I believed our civilization was fundamentally just. That our laws protected the vulnerable. That our systems worked. He activated the projector. Images filled the air above the council chamber. Not just from Melissa's case, but from dozens of others that had come to light in the past 2 days. Humans with broken bones, burns, lacerations. Medical reports detailing injuries that had been dismissed as accidents. Contract clauses that essentially made humans indentured servants. I was wrong, Draken continued. Our systems don't work. Not for humans. And it took my 3-year-old son to show me that. He saw injustice and couldn't accept it. He didn't care about contracts or procedures or economic impact. He cared that someone was being hurt and he decided to stop it. A Kralgoth representative stood up, his exoskeleton gleaming. Commander Draken, with respect, your son nearly killed one of my species. Vexthor is still in medical care. Should we celebrate violence as a solution to workplace disputes? Draken's eyes flashed dangerously. Your species member was attempting to murder a defenseless human. My son used the minimum force necessary to stop him. If you want to discuss violence, let's talk about the 43 human workers who've died under suspicious circumstances in the past year alone. Deaths that were ruled accidental because no one bothered to investigate properly. The chamber erupted into argument. Species shouted at each other across the space. Some defended the current system. Others demanded reform. The chaos continued until the Council Prime, an ancient being whose species had founded the Galactic Council millennia ago, raised a crystalline hand for silence. Enough. We are not here to assign blame. We are here to solve a problem. Commander Draken, you mentioned having a proposal? Draken nodded. He'd spent the past 2 days working on this, consulting with legal experts, labor specialists, and most importantly, human representatives from Earth's government. What he was about to suggest was unprecedented, radical, and would fundamentally change the power dynamics of galactic civilization. But after watching his son risk everything for a friend, how could he do anything less? Dragon territories will offer immediate sanctuary and citizenship to any human facing labor exploitation. Furthermore, we formally extend protection to human communities who request it under ancient client species laws. The chamber exploded again. Client species relationships hadn't been established in over 3,000 years. They were considered archaic, a remnant of more primitive times. The last time a major species had taken clients, it had led to a war that reshaped galactic politics. But there was precedent. The law still existed. And dragon territories were autonomous enough that the council couldn't simply forbid it. A Valerian diplomat stood, her multiple eyes blinking in sequence. This is absurd. Humans aren't some primitive species needing protection. They're advanced, educated, capable. Client status would infantilize them. Client status protects them, Draken countered. Under those laws, any harm done to a human under dragon protection is treated as harm done to dragons themselves. It gives them leverage. Real leverage. Not just words in a contract that employers ignore. Danny, who'd been granted special permission to observe the proceedings, stood from the visitors section. If I may speak, Council? I'm one of the humans from Station Helios 9. I've been working in space for 12 years. I've been assaulted 3 times, had my wages stolen twice, and been threatened with deportation for complaining. And I'm lucky. I'm still alive and still working. He looked around at the assembled representatives. We don't need infantilizing. We need someone powerful enough to make abusers think twice. Commander Draken is offering that. His species is offering that. And honestly, after watching a 3-year-old dragon show more courage and honor than most adults I've met, I'm inclined to trust them. Other humans in the visitor section stood as well, adding their voices. Within an hour, human representatives from 17 worlds had formally requested dragon protection. Earth's government, after furious debate, officially endorsed the proposal. The council had no choice but to allow it. The laws were clear. Dragons had the right to take clients. Humans had the right to accept. But something else happened, something no one had predicted. Other species began scrambling to respond. The crystallines offered their own protection pacts. The verdants proposed new labor regulations. Even some Kralgoth delegations, embarrassed by Vexthor's actions, suggested reforms within their own territories. It became a competition. Species that had ignored human welfare for decades suddenly fell over themselves, offering protections, better contracts, improved conditions. Not out of altruism necessarily, but because losing access to human workers would devastate their economies. The galactic labor market transformed almost overnight. Humans went from being viewed as convenient workers to valued partners. Contract templates were rewritten. Oversight committees were established. And most importantly, humans gained something they'd never really had before in galactic society: leverage. Back on Station Helios 9, life slowly returned to normal. Vexthor had been deported and faced criminal charges on his homeworld. The 17 human workers from the kitchen had all accepted generous settlements. Most chose to stay on the station under new contracts with protection clauses that actually meant something. Melissa decided to stay too. The station administrator had personally apologized and offered her the position of head chef, which she'd accepted on the condition that she could implement new safety standards and hire her own staff. 5 weeks after the incident, Ash visited the kitchen again. He was nervous, unsure of his welcome. The last time he'd been here, he'd nearly killed someone and destroyed half the equipment. But when he peeked through the door, Melissa's face lit up. There he is. Get in here, little hero. The kitchen staff, all human now, applauded as Ash entered. They'd made him a cake, decorated with icing flames and a message that read, "Thank you for your fire." Ash felt his scales warm with embarrassment. "I'm not a hero. I couldn't let him hurt you." Melissa knelt down, her bruises finally healed, her smile genuine and bright. "That's exactly what makes you a hero, Ash. You saw something wrong and fixed it. Not because you wanted glory or rewards, but because it was the right thing to do." She hugged him gently. "You changed my life. You changed all our lives. And maybe, just maybe, you changed the whole galaxy a little bit too." Danny approached, carrying a small box. "We got you something." All of us chipped in. Inside was a pendant on a chain, sized for a young dragon. It was beautifully crafted, showing a dragon and a human standing side by side. "It's a symbol," Danny explained, "of partnership, of protection, of what happened here. We want you to have it so you never forget that what you did mattered." Ash looked at the pendant, then at the humans surrounding him. People from different Earth nations, different backgrounds, different stories, but united now by shared experience and mutual respect. "I won't forget," he promised. "Ever." Lord Draken watched from the doorway, staying out of sight. He'd followed his son, wanting to make sure Ash was truly welcome. What he saw filled him with profound emotion. His son was laughing now, listening to Melissa tell a story about her grandmother's kitchen back on Earth. Other humans were offering him samples of new dishes they'd created. They treated him like family, like one of their own, despite the obvious differences in species and size and capability. This was what the galaxy needed. Not just laws and regulations and formal protections, though those were important, but genuine connection. Real friendship. The understanding that strength meant protecting others, not dominating them. A soft chime indicated an incoming message. Draken checked his communicator and smiled. It was from the Dragon High Council. They'd reviewed his actions and the unprecedented client species declaration. Their message was brief but meaningful. "You and your hatchling honor our fire. Well done." 20 other dragon commanders had followed his lead. Across the galaxy, dragons were extending protection to human communities. Some humans accepted, grateful for the security. Others used the offers as leverage to negotiate better terms with their current employers. Either way, the dynamic had shifted. Humans were no longer just convenient labor. They were partners, allies, friends worth protecting. And it all started because a baby dragon saw bruises on a human cook and decided that was unacceptable. 5 years later, Station Helios 9 hosted the first human-dragon cultural exchange center. Melissa ran the culinary program, teaching both species each other's cooking traditions. Ash, now an adolescent dragon with full control of his flames, worked as a junior diplomat specializing in human-dragon relations. The kitchen where it all began had been preserved as a memorial. Visitors from across the galaxy came to see it, to understand what had happened here. The scorch marks on the wall had been left untouched, a reminder of the fire that changed everything. On the wall, a plaque read, "Strength is measured not by what you can destroy but by what you choose to protect. Remember the courage of the small. Remember that justice sometimes comes from unexpected places. Remember Ash and Melissa, and the day everything changed. Because sometimes, the smallest among us teach the greatest lessons. Sometimes a child's sense of right and wrong is clearer than an adult's complicated reasoning. And sometimes, all it takes is one act of courage to illuminate the darkness and show the galaxy what it should have been all along. A place where everyone, regardless of species or strength or status, deserves to be treated with dignity. Where the vulnerable are protected, not exploited. Where friendship matters more than profit, and compassion is valued as much as capability." The human question had been answered. Not through debate or legislation, though those helped. But through action. Through a 3-year-old dragon who saw someone in pain and decided to do something about it. And the galaxy was better for it.